The moon found itself very pale. It envied the sun with its plume of golden feathers. So one day it waited until the sun was looking at the other side of the world, as it often did, and stole some of its golden feathers. When the sun realized what had happened, it was furious and threw mud at the moon, swearing that it would remain stuck to its face forever. And since that day, the moon has had mud stains on its face. All it thinks about is revenge. As soon as the sun's back is turned, it throws dust in its face, and the sun's brightness is dulled. The Bantu tribes of the Zambesi tell this tale to account for the mist that descends on the savannah. Every natural phenomenon, every animal, every landscape has fired the imagination of the African people. And the more spectacular, the more amazing, the more unusual nature is, the more it fuels the continent's myths and legends. Dozens of rocky peaks rise up out of these hills in Cameroon. Some of these monoliths are over 300 feet high. They're found in the Mandara Mountains in the north of the country. These giant stone outcrops are volcanic in origin. They're called dikes, the remains of old volcanic chimneys. At Romsiki, a village in the heart of the mountains, people have some less rational explanations to offer. Some say they're the fingers of the spirits sticking out of the earth. Others believe they're the petrified huts of an ancient people of giants. Time passes slowly here, and people have plenty of opportunities to exercise their fantasy. Everyone has their own idea, but nobody will say what it is. If nature has revelations to make, secrets to share, it's always through the offices of the witch doctor. In this Kapsiki tribe, the witch doctor has joined forces with an animal to practice his divinations. He keeps a crab in a jar and consults it every time he must look into the future. He places the crab in a recipient where he has previously laid out a number of wooden counters and sticks in a certain order. In the darkness, the crab will move them about, and the witch doctor then has to interpret the signs.
Yakının zarı deli nasıl yok?
Deli ya.
Iya, biz kenal deli.
Ya.
Ama to. Nanya kanti tinika tinganganyak sharip insay. Asya kanya nya kuri khambri ko.
Umbrinho.
Iya, nanzana takaw.
Kwanga do.
Ana wala bi khaw.
Kwanga.
Kanga traso.
Jangan baba. Jangan de dwalo.
Wa jar kan dangaman dre.
Do hila dum nangaman di. Jangan diga.
Yad me chele jukti kirta bashil khawa khiyak zurbiyan.
If the prediction is not clear enough or the witch doctor needs further explanations, he asks the crab to whisper in his ear. The crab is a sort of messenger between the earth and the spirit world, a messenger of the beyond. It's no coincidence that the marsh crab has been chosen for this role. When it scurries down into the mud, they imagine it's gone off in search of news of the spirit world. In African myths and legends, each animal is given a role in keeping with its nature, its habitat, or what it represents. With its strange looks, its slow gait and its ability to change color, the chameleon is an ambiguous animal. It occupies an essential place in the continent's folklore. The creator instructed a chameleon to transmit a message to the human race. It was a simple message: men will live forever. But at the same time, he instructed a lizard to pass on the opposite message, that all men would die. The creator had no preconceived idea about mankind's fate, so he decided to let nature choose. The chameleon had a good head start and should have arrived first, but it dawdled on the way and was overtaken by the lizard. The lizard passed on its message first, and that was how the tragic fate of the human race was decided. Although the lizard was the bearer of bad tidings, lizards are quite well liked. People feel they have something in common with them, perhaps because their feet are like little hands. Besides, it was really the chameleon's fault that death came to Earth for being so slow and irresponsible. Two days ago, the great antelope horn that serves as a war trumpet rang out 3 times during the night. It was announcing a death in the village. Today, everyone is gathered for the funeral ceremony. In Kapsiki country, death is a festive occasion. People dance and sing around the dead man's sare, the enclosure which houses his huts and millet granaries. Then comes the moment when the body of the deceased is symbolically passed over the walls of his home and taken round the village one last time before being buried. The procession calls in at all the places where the deceased used to go when he was alive. Traditionally, it's always the blacksmith who carries the body sitting astride his shoulders. The deceased is decked in his finest apparel and decorated with feathers which have a strong symbolic value. Feathers represent the passing from the world of the living to the world of the dead, for birds are the only creatures that live both on the earth and in the heavens. More than any other bird, it's the flamingo that traditionally symbolizes the soul's journey from the darkness to the light. Just about every bird has its place somewhere in African myths and legend. The crow, for example, is a guiding and protecting spirit. The pigeon has acquired a reputation as a bird of ill omen, as its cooing is considered to sound like the plaintive cries of a soul in pain. Herons have it both ways, now hero, now villain, symbolizing either vigilance or the bird's main weakness, its unhealthy curiosity. But pride of place in this winged bestiary undoubtedly goes to the crowned crane. In Mali, this bird is actually credited with inventing speech. Tradition has it that man learned to speak by imitating its call. The crowned crane embodies the three fundamental attributes of the word: beauty by its plumage, sound by its cry, with its unique inflections, and movement by its mating dance. The crane is not actually worshipped as such, but you can get a good idea of what it represents in Africa from these words to an initiatic chant of a Bambara tribe in Mali. The beginning of speech is the crowned crane. The crowned crane said, "I speak." Being the first to speak, the crane was naturally the first to tell stories. These stories came to the ears of men and are passed on from village to village, from generation to generation. They all speak of the same things, of wind and thunder, rivers and mountains, the savannah and the animals who live there. They all begin with the same words. How did it come to pass? In the east of Africa, among the Bantus, they say that Wele was the supreme god who created the world, starting with the heavens, which sent the rain. Then Wele set to work again, this time creating the earth, man and woman, and only then the plants and the animals. This version of the creation proposed by the Bantus would leave the Bushmen of southern Africa quite perplexed. As far as they're concerned, the creation happened in a very different order. Just after the heavens and the earth came the animals, and in a very precise order, starting with the eland. Then came the gnu and the roan antelope. Then the oryx with its long, straight horns. The kudu, to which the Creator gave spirally curved horns. And then the giraffe with its long neck to eat everything the others left on the highest branches. The Creator had his work cut out, for there were lots of animals to make, and he wanted them all to be different. When it came to the hippo's turn, the hippo had an argument with the Creator. The huge beast insisted on living in the water. Now, seeing this huge animal with its enormous mouth and imagining its phenomenal appetite, the Creator thought of all the fish he had put in the ponds and lakes. It just wouldn't be right to put the hippos in there with them. They probably would eat up all the fish in one gulp. Besides, he'd already given that place to the crocodile. So he ordered the hippopotamus to go and live on the plains. The hippo did as he was told, but grunting and snorting so much that the Creator eventually gave in on one condition, that the hippo never ate a single fish. And ever since, hippos have lived in ponds, climbing out now and then to drop their excrement on the banks, so that the Creator can check that there are no fish bones. When all the other animals had been created, there was only one left to make, the lion. The lion was the last animal to be created, just after the warthog and the elephant, and just before people. For the Bushman, the first human being descended from a lion. If the Bushmen consider that man is a descendant of the lion, there are other peoples who believe that animals descend from man. The Watas in eastern Kenya are an example, with their version of how the elephant was born. Long ago, in the days of the first Waza hunter, a great drought reigned over the savannah. The animals had deserted the land, and the hunter always came home empty-handed. Then one day the hunter's wife left her daily chores. She went a little way out of the village and started to eat leaves and branches and grass, and to cover her body with dust. She did this day after day, and it was rumored in the tribe that her features were changing. Her skin was growing rough and wrinkled, her nose was growing longer, and her ears were growing larger, and 2 huge ivory teeth were growing right out of her mouth. She grew monstrously fat and was ready to offer her flesh in sacrifice to the hunter's arrows. In African tradition, it's not at all unusual for humans to become animals and vice versa. All it takes is a little magic and a good witch doctor. In the little village of Soko, the witch doctor was one of the best in the land. Soko is a village in Ivory Coast, near the border with Ghana. At the end of the 19th century, the region lived in terror. They dreaded the arrival of a merchant called Samori from the upper Niger, who had his own army and was trying to conquer the country. Samori was heading east, systematically destroying any villages that resisted him. One day in 1888, when Samori was approaching with his soldiers, his slaves and his looters, the witch doctor in Soko wondered what he should do. He knew that the usual sacrifices and libations would not suffice to ward off the danger. He'd have to resort to big magic. He consulted the spirits of the ancestors and soon found out how to save the men, women and children from being massacred. When Samori finally entered the village, it was completely deserted. So he didn't linger there. He paid no attention to the monkeys that watched his troops go by. Yet the monkeys were the villagers. The witch doctor had turned them into monkeys to save them. Once the danger had passed, of course, the witch doctor was to turn them back into people. However, exhausted by his big magic, the witch doctor died, and there was nobody to turn the villagers back into human beings. Unlike everywhere else in Africa, where people tend to consider monkeys as thieves, in Soko they're well looked after. Here everybody believes that by feeding or being kind to a monkey, they're no doubt helping an ancestor. Some animals in Africa have actually been saved by these superstitious beliefs and legends. One example is a snake that lives in the neighboring country of Benin. In the lake region in the south of the country, the python is considered as a holy animal. The local people frequently dance in its honor. The dance is meant to mime the snake's behavior. In the town of Ouida, the Peda people actually worship the python. Behind these doors, inside the temple devoted to them, pythons are fed and looked after. The holy pythons are brought out on the occasion of the great ceremony organized in honor of the snake god. It's an opportunity for the village elders to show their respect and even their fondness for these reptiles which they consider to be their ancestors. They're not dangerous snakes to handle in this way, as they're not poisonous. In fact, that's probably why they enjoy this privileged status. If someone finds a wild python in their house, they don't harm it. They just ask one of the young people of the village to gently remove it. While this python is taken back into the bush with all due respect, in a nearby village, every able-bodied man is being briefed for a snake hunt. Someone saw a cobra near the huts. Cobras are dangerous snakes, and everyone will be happier when it has been found. If they do find the cobra, they will kill it, for only the python enjoys such special status here. The outcome of the hunt is uncertain, to say the least. To tell the truth, there's very little hope of catching the snake, for they flee at the slightest vibration, unless of course it has taken refuge in its nest. They demolish this anthill because cobras often nest in anthills. There's no harm in demolishing the anthill here, as it has no particular significance. But there are other peoples for whom anthills are sacred. They represent anvils fallen from heaven to teach men the blacksmith's craft. In their attempt to corner the cobra, they disturb a python that was lazing there minding its own business. Whether they're a threat or a fetish, snakes are ever present in the beliefs and legends of these lake-filled regions. Snakes are often associated with water, as their undulations are reminiscent of the bends in a river. They share their lacustrine habitat with the crocodile, another animal that commands both fear and respect. In Burkina Faso, all crocodiles are protected because all crocodiles are worshipped. According to the legend, it all started in the heart of the country, in the village of Sabu. They say that many years ago, the village chief was saved by a crocodile. At the height of the dry season, he'd strayed far from any waterhole and was dying of dehydration. Instead of devouring him, a passing crocodile brought him out of his coma. It went back to a pond which it alone knew about, dipped its tail in and brought the water back for the dying man to drink. When he got home, the village chief ordered his people to worship not only the crocodile that saved him, but all its brothers and descendants too. This tradition has been perpetuated over the years in a few holy waterholes where the crocodiles can live in peace even today. This one is at Bazule, less than 20 miles west of the capital, Ouagadougou. When it's full, the water covers about 12 acres, and up to 100 crocodiles live here. To keep the crocodiles away from the pigs or sheep in the village, the villagers regularly give them a few chickens to keep them happy. Here too, crocodiles are thought to house the souls of ancestors. Many people in Western Africa are still animists at heart. They believe that animals and natural phenomena have souls. In the east of the continent, the Maasai, like most of the peoples of the Nile Basin, tend to believe in a single god. The god of the Maasai is called Ngai. Ngai is a pure spirit who uses nature to reveal his moods to men. If he's in a bad mood, he says so with a thunderclap. If, on the other hand, he's in a good mood, he makes a rainbow appear. And when their god is really upset by the behavior of men, he shows it in a much more spectacular way. They say that Lake Bogoria in the west of Kenya was created by an angry god. Many years ago, two tribes, the Sokomos and the Kamals, once lived on the site now occupied by the lake and its flamingos. The Sokomos were very hospitable, always ready to welcome travelers. Unlike the Kamals, who were reluctant to receive visitors and always gave them curdled milk, rotten meat and mouldy vegetables. The two tribes worshipped the same god, whose name was Chebet. Chebet was very annoyed at the Kamals for disregarding the most basic rules of hospitality, so one day he decided to punish them. And down came the rain, torrential rain that lasted days and days. Forewarned, the Sokomos had time to flee to their village and take refuge in the hills. The Kamals, who were also lazy, watched the water rising for a long time before they reacted, but by then it was too late. There was now a lake in the place of their village, and the whole tribe was drowned in the rising waters. Even today, from time to time, you can still hear the plaintive cries of the lost tribe rising from the bottom of the lake. In this region, the gods seem to be particularly touchy about the rules of hospitality, and the punishment is always the same. A few hundred miles away lies Lake Simbi. Lake Simbi is in Osodo Bay in the west of Kenya. The water in the lake is extremely deep, and its origin is a mystery, for it has no known source. In the neighboring village, of course, everybody knows how the lake was formed. The legend here is another version of the story of Lake Bogoria, and dozens of other lakes in Africa are claimed to have their origins in very similar tales. In spite of these occasional fits of anger, the god of the African people is of a naturally clement disposition. In fact, originally he lived amongst men, until one day, tired of hearing them quarrel, he went and asked a spider to lend him its web to leave the earth and climb up to heaven. This image of a disenchanted, rather flippant god is found in a legend of the Bushmen that tells the story of some curious trees found in northeastern Namibia. They're called Moringa ovalifolia. When you look at them, you get the impression that they have roots instead of branches, as if they'd been planted upside down, a feature that has not escaped the notice of the local population. As far as the Bushmen are concerned, there's a very simple explanation why these trees are so different. When the Creator had finished his work and created the mountains, the plains, the savannah, man and all the animals, he suddenly realized he still had 2 great bunches of trees to find a place for. But he was tired and did not know what to do with them, so he threw them up in the air and they all fell to the earth upside down. The site they occupy is known as Ghost Tree Forest. Like many rather unusual places, it's thought to be haunted by spirits. Each environment has its own spirit. The spirit is the expression of a natural force. It may be hazy, or on the contrary, extremely clear. Of all natural environments, it's the river that undergoes the most spectacular changes from one day to the next. With its torrential periods that resemble fits of anger and the times when its bed runs dry and it looks as if it's asleep, it's almost as if the river were alive. Unpredictable, often troubled, the waters of the river are mysterious and awe-inspiring, the ideal home for a spirit. Spirits can be very touchy, especially when anyone starts tampering with their environment. Most of the time, of course, the local populations fear the wrath of the spirits and do everything they can to appease them. But there was a time in 1955, in what was then Rhodesia and is now Zimbabwe, when the Batonka people implored the spirit of the river to unleash its wrath. The Batonkas lived in the upper reaches of the Zambesi Valley, and the white authorities had announced that they would soon have to leave as their village was to be flooded. The water was going to rise and submerge the whole valley. For downstream they had decided to build one of the largest dams in the world on the Zambesi, the Kariba Dam. The dam was to flood 2,000 square miles to supply the country with electricity. The name Kariba comes from Kariwa, which in the Shona language means trap. The Batonkas did everything they could to prevent it from happening, to prevent the water from covering their land, to stop them drowning the trees. They did it their own way, the only way they knew, by invoking Nyami Nyami, the spirit of the river. Nyami Nyami could not stop the water from rising, but he made the builders pay for their foolishness. Several times, sudden floods carried off part of the dam they were building, and almost 100 workmen perished in the angry waters. In 1959, a year before the dam went into service, the animals were driven away and 50,000 Batonkas were moved out of their homes. With heavy hearts, they had no choice but to move up to higher ground. The battle was lost, the water was there, so everyone thought that Nyami Nyami had swallowed his pride. But a few years later, the lake was mysteriously invaded by a parasitic weed, and everybody said it was the spirit of the river venting his wrath. When the weed finally disappeared, the lake had a few peaceful years. The animals returned to its shores, and people began to appreciate this unusual landscape. Then in 1991, the region underwent a severe and terrible drought. The water level in the lake was so low that the turbines in the dam no longer produced enough electricity. The Batonkas were encouraged by this new sign of the river's anger. Now they say that the spirit will not be pacified until the water is back to its original level, in other words, until they remove the dam that bars its way. They say that Nyami Nyami has the head of a fish and the tail of a snake, but no one has ever seen him, which is not surprising. After all, he's a spirit. Spirits send various signs to convey their moods, but they never show themselves, so one thing is sure, it was no spirit the fishermen spotted in the waters of Lake Victoria. Everybody lives from fishing here, and everyone has heard of the monster of the lake. On the Ugandan side, they call it Lukwata. But in Kenya, it's known by another name, Olumaina. Everyone remembers the vivid description given by a neighbor, a cousin, or an elder who got it directly from one of the fishermen who spotted the beast. It's about 14 foot long, smaller than a large crocodile, but also quite different, with the head of a dog, little ears like a puff adder's horns, claws, short legs and neck, and so on. If it's so seldom seen, it's no doubt because Lake Victoria is so huge. When the catch is smaller than usual, the fishermen wonder if the monster was not swimming nearby, scaring the fish away. Once or twice a year there are lively conversations by the lakeside when somebody claims to have seen the monster basking on the sandy shore in the distance just before it disappeared back into the water. Lake Victoria is only 260 feet deep, but it covers a vast area, almost 27,000 square miles. There's no telling whether or not its waters really shelter some kind of fish or animal that has not yet been identified by man. Of all the continents, Africa is perhaps the only one that's still capable of surprising us with unknown species of large animals. It still has many remote and virtually impenetrable regions. In 1983, in the middle of Lake Tele in northern Congo, a scientific expedition claimed to have observed an unknown animal for some time. They're adamant that it was neither a great snake nor a sea cow that they saw in the lake. It looked more like a sort of dinosaur. From the Sudan to Zambia, from Cameroon to Tanzania, there are innumerable eyewitness accounts of the existence of an aquatic animal that bears a striking resemblance to the herbivores of prehistoric times. Numerous expeditions have set off in search of this more or less mythical creature. They call it the Mokelebembe. Some have found strange footprints, but never the animal itself. Even the spectacular bone findings that occasionally cause a stir of excitement have always been identified as belonging to some known species. The skeptics say that there's no such thing as the Mokelebembe, that it's merely a figment of the local people's imagination. But there are so many spectacular and little-known animal species in Africa that even scientists sometimes wonder. Those who believe in the monster's existence like to recall that not so very long ago, in the Congo in 1900, Sir Harry Johnston, the governor of Uganda, discovered the okapi. This cousin of the giraffe, which had been completely unknown until then, bears a striking resemblance to a creature from the Tertiary era, the Helidotherium. For a long time to come, Africa will continue to be a land of magic and mystery. This we can be sure of. When evening comes, the sun will sink in the west, where the souls of the dead go, and as it continues on its way round the earth until morning, the sky is filled with shooting stars, which, as we all know, are the eyes of the gods, who come closer at night to check what new mischief men are getting up to here on Earth.